Good morning, everyone. Happy day after Derby Day. I know there's one person in the room who did not pick the winning horse, despite great efforts and analyzation of all the data. But anybody else pick the winning horse yesterday? Oh, sort of. All right. Race 11. Okay, we'll take it. Race 11, we'll take a win.
You lost by a nostril.
Listen, if y'all didn't watch, it was pretty exciting. Photo finish. But as you came in today, you might have noticed that there are white banners around you and white here on this table. The truth of the matter is they've actually been white for a few weeks now, okay? But maybe you hadn't noticed, what the colors were because you've been so dazzled by the spectacular preaching. I mean, Wendell preached last week, so I bet that could be part of it. Or, it could be that you've just been caught up catching up with all your friends and singing along to the great music. Maybe you did notice, but you just assumed they just chose that because they thought it would look nice in the room. It was just an interior design decision. But in reality, these pyramids are on display because we are in the season of Eastertide, the 50 days after Jesus' resurrection from the dead, in which we are supposed to keep the party going, right? It's not supposed to be a one-day celebration and that's it. For 50 days, we are called to celebrate, and we do so with this color in particular. White symbolizes joy, it symbolizes life, it symbolizes light and glory. And so we put up the white pyramids on days in which we remember particularly meaningful days in the life of Jesus. So like on the day we remember Jesus' baptism, on the day that we remember his transfiguration. But usually those are like a one-day thing and then they're gone. But during the season, we leave them up all 50 days long, which I think is significant and appropriate because in reality, the season of Eastertide is the season that we are continuing to live in right now. We live in the age that follows Jesus' resurrection from the grave. Death has been defeated. Evil has been overcome. Because of Jesus, the worst thing will never be the last thing for us. And so how do we continue to live into this? Because the resurrection was really just the start. How do we live our lives in such a way that we continue to celebrate? What does it look like for us to follow Jesus in this season of Easter that is to be continued, that is unfolding right now in our midst? Well, we've been looking at the Gospel of John to give us insight into this over the past few weeks, and we're going to continue to do that today. But before we dive in, I want you to just think to yourself for a moment, how do we typically celebrate special people in our lives? How is it that we honor the people that we love? Sometimes we do it with parties, right? Maybe a birthday party, an anniversary party, retirement party. And that's fun. It's festive, right? There's usually decorations and there's food and there's fellowship. I particularly like the food part. But when I turned 40, the church staff actually had me a birthday party. It was a surprise. I didn't know they were doing it. They lured me down into the Cup of Hope. And whenever I walked in the door, they had the place decorated in my favorite TV show, which if you've been around for a while, you might have heard me talk about Law and Order SVU a few times. So there was somebody at the last service that said to me, they didn't decorate it like that, did they? Can you see it like crime tape everywhere? It was a different TV show. But they had it decorated in one of my favorite TV shows. They had gotten one of those basketball goals that goes on the back of a door, and they'd arranged a full-on shootout tournament where they had the brackets and we worked through it together. I still have the goal. It's on the back of my door in my office if you ever want to come by and play. They had gluten-free cupcakes. And then they had made this video with all these nice, encouraging things people were saying. And so it was awesome. I felt so known and so loved and so seen. But let's be honest, I'm not going to get a party like that thrown for me every day, right? You're not going to get a party like that thrown for you every day. We'd be exhausted, and work has to get done sometimes, right? It's like things have to get finished. So sometimes, instead of going the party route, we honor people with special gifts. For example, right now, my son Sam's favorite gift that he brings me are flowers. It's so sweet. He comes in with them in his hand. But again, if you've been around here a while, you know that I can't grow things. So these flowers are not coming from our yard, but from all of our neighbors' yards, which I'm sure that people really appreciate. But it's very sweet, very thoughtful of him. Sometimes we get jewelry for our loved ones, or, a lot of times, like maybe when someone retires, or maybe when they're passed on, we do things like monuments or maybe statues if you're really famous, or plaques of some sort, plaques of appreciation. Sometimes people do things like dedicate a park bench to a person, and so I found some really fun plaques for those, like remembering JCH, who was often tired. It's very appropriate. Or in memory of Roger Bucklesby, who hated this park and everyone in it. Or this one's pretty good too. Stephen R., not dead, just loves plaques. Seems great. So, sometimes we go that route. But whatever the gift is that we give, the point is that once a person receives it from that point forward, it's this reminder of how much they're appreciated, right? And it's very thoughtful and it's very nice. But as time goes on, we know, like, the flowers are going to wilt, right? The jewelry that you got, it might get lost. The plaques and all the other things we might receive, they tend to collect dust and tarnish. And so while all these things are wonderful ways to honor the people in our lives that we 1,000% should continue on, they do have their limits, right? They aren't gifts that necessarily like keep on giving. A party that we throw for one night or a gift that we hand someone one time doesn't necessarily keep that person at the forefront of our mind. It doesn't necessarily impact how we live out our day-to-day life. And so when we want to honor someone who is extremely important in our life, like Jesus, then how can we do that? How can we celebrate in a way that endures across time? How can we celebrate in a way that's more than this flurry of appreciation on Christmas or on Easter or when we come together on Sunday mornings? How can we make every day a celebration of who Jesus is and what he has done for us? Well, the good news is Jesus, he just kind of comes right out and tells us how he wants us to do that when we read through the Gospel of John. Starting in John chapter 13, we have what's called the farewell discourse. And so you can take a few hints from that. Somebody saying goodbye, right? And not just like a quick little pep talk, but like a long conversation that's happening, right? And so this is what's happening on the night that Jesus knows that he's about to die. Like, he knows what is before him. He's gathered with his disciples in the upper room. And if you knew you only had a few short minutes left to share with your closest friends, you'd be choosing your words pretty wisely in that moment, right? You'd want to say the things that matter, the things that you want them to always remember from that point forward. And so while Jesus has been teaching his disciples all along, now in this moment, it's time for him to go to the heart of the matter, right? It's time for him to boil all these teachings down and make sure that they get it. He's saying the things that he does not want them to miss or forget. And so as he starts this discourse, this conversation with his disciples, right out of the gate, he says the thing that is most important. He gives them a new commandment, he says. But when you look at it, you're kind of like, Jesus, is that really new? Because when you look at it, it looks a lot like an old one, but he's just amplifying it a little bit. He says, love one another. Love one another. In fact, he says, this is the thing, right? This is the thing that's going to tell everyone else that you are my disciples. Not how much knowledge you have, not by how well you're able to debate against other perspectives, not how well you keep all the rules and regulations, and certainly not by you telling other people how wrong that they are. But rather, they're going to know that you are my disciples by your love, by the way that you relate to one another. And so right out of the gate, here's Jesus, first thing, laying down this call for them. But just in case they missed it, right? He says it first thing, but sometimes we have ADHD like squirrel, and we might miss something that's going on, right? And so Jesus circles back, and he says the same thing again, and that's what we heard read for us earlier. As the Father has loved me, this is chapter 15, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. And so on the surface, as we hear this, as we read this, we might receive this as an obligation that Jesus is giving us, right? An obligation of something that we must do if we want to remain in his good graces. Kind of like Jesus pointing his finger and saying, hey, I've loved you. And so you better love other people in return. And if you don't, well, then no more love for you. It's easy to kind of read it in that kind of tone. But here's the thing that I think all of us know, right? All of us understand deep down. Love is not something that you can legislate. Love is not an obligation for us to keep, but rather it is an overflow of what we have received. And so when we go back and we look at that passage, we can see this progression, right? We notice that Jesus describes how first the Father loved him. And now, because Jesus has received this extravagant love from the Father, he says that now he has loved us with that same love that he has received, right? And so that's the progression. We have Jesus telling us how the same love that overflowed from the Father to him has now come to us. And here in John 15, what he does is he says, let it overflow once more, right? Don't stop it. Instead, celebrate him and the great love that he extends to us by letting that love overflow yet again by loving each other with the same love that he is always and everywhere giving to us as we live in relationship with him. This is how Jesus invites him, right? Invites us to celebrate him. He's like, how it is when you're getting close to your birthday and people are like, what do you want? What kind of present would you like? And you're like, oh, I don't know. And sometimes you want people to read your mind. I would never do that. But this is Jesus coming right out and saying, like, here's my list. This is what I want, right? He says to us, this is how I want you to celebrate me, by continuing on my legacy of love, by doing the things that I did, by caring about the things that I care about, by taking seriously the things that I take seriously. And if you think about it, that's how we tend to celebrate the most special people in our lives, right? We celebrate them by continuing their legacy on. My mom is a bit over the top when it comes to Christmas time in the Sparks household. In fact, we have a nickname for her, and it is Nana Claus. And let me tell you, Santa Claus cannot keep up with her. And so when Christmas rolls around, which actually Christmas is kind of year-round for her, like she is already shopping for the following year, but there's always this abundance of very carefully and thoughtfully selected gifts for each person. And then just when you think like all the presents have been opened up, wait, there's more, right? Like she always has something hidden for everyone. And so a long time ago, I can remember like being a bit overwhelmed by like this show of love. And I can remember feeling a little bit guilty about it. And it's like, wow, like she's giving us so much, right? Like my parents are both school teachers. I knew like there wasn't a whole lot of cash lying around. And so I went to my mom and I was like, hey mom, like this is really great, but you really don't have to do this for us. And that's when she explained. She said when she was a little girl, her grandmother, who I have a picture of here, this is my mom here on the left in front, and behind her is who we called Mama Mildred. I'm actually named after her. Her real name was Laura, but she thought that that was a terrible, ugly name and refused to go by it. It hasn't given me a complex at all. But that's her Mama Mildred. And she told me that when she was a little girl, her grandmother would, she would all year long take in ironing and iron people's clothes and babysit. And every single penny that she earned, she would put into this jar and she would save it all up until Christmas. And then she would spend every penny of it on them. And then when Christmas came, she would just sit back and she would watch with so much joy on her face as they opened up each gift one by one. She made them like literally go person by person around the room. And so my mom said, you know, like now it brings me so much joy to do the same thing. And so I've never told my mom to not do this for us anymore because now I get it, right? Like she's continuing this legacy on. This isn't an obligation for her. This is an overflow. Her grandmother loved her in this extravagant way, and she felt it, and she experienced it, and now she wants her kids and her grandkids to experience the same thing. And so my mom, she did things like teach summer school and do tutoring after school so that she could save up. Why? Because it is her joy. It is her joy to give away what she has been given. And now as an adult, you better believe, like, I want to be able to do the same thing for my kids as well. But this is what Jesus is describing in this passage. This is the kind of thing he's talking about. He knows the joy that comes from first and foremost receiving God's great love for him and then being able to give that away to others. And he wants us to experience that. He wants our joy to be made complete like his is. And so what does that look like? What does it look like for us to love others like Jesus has loved us? How can we celebrate him? By carrying forward his legacy of love. Well, Jesus, he goes on to describe the kind of love he's talking about. He says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You know, Jesus in this moment, he's giving them this clue about what he is about to do, right? Like he is literally about to die for them so that they could come fully alive. And then he holds this up as the picture of what true love looks like. This example of what it looks like for us to love others like he loves us. It is a love that takes action. It is a love that sacrifices. It's a love that looks out for the good of others. You and I, we might not ever be asked to literally lay down our lives for another person, but I can tell you that Jesus calls us to die in 1,000,001 other ways every single day. He calls us to lay down our agenda. He calls us to lay down our perspective and preferences. He calls us to lay down our own opinions, our own need to be at the center of the universe, to lay down our own need to win and accomplish so that we can actually see the person in front of us, so that we can meet them where they are in that moment, so that we can respond to them with the grace and the love that they need. But again, none of this is out of obligation, right? We do this because we know that we have a God who truly sees us. We know that we have a God who is able to meet us where we are and who responds to us with the love and care and grace that we need in this and in every moment. But you guys, I recognize as I'm saying this to you all, like I'm just preaching to the choir. You know, you all already get this. You do this all the time. I have the privilege of like having a front row seat to watching the love of Jesus flow into you and then flow out into the lives of others all the time. You know, I watch you come here on Sundays and worship together, and I watch you share in relationships with one another, and then I watch you turn around and extend it to others. Not because it's the right thing to do, not because you're supposed to, not even because, it's right? But because you just can't help it, right? You just cannot keep the love inside of you. It has to go somewhere. And so I've watched you do things like watch another person and see that they might be feeling lonely or down and invite them out to coffee or lunch. I've watched you do things like mourn with tears and comfort food alongside people who've lost loved ones. I've watched you look for jobs for strangers who become like family to you. I've watched you give up your days off to deliver meals to seniors. I've watched you give away cars to people who needed them. And the list could just go on and on and on of the ways that you love people with action, with the ways that you have sacrificed, with the ways that you look out for the good of others. Over the last few weeks, my family has gotten to experience the love of Jesus through you with calls and texts and with lots of delicious food and hugs and taking time to play with our children. And none of it has felt like it's been done out of obligation. It's felt like it's been done out of joy because you're simply giving away what you have already received. And so I want to say thank you for that. And I do just want to give thanks for the many beautiful ways that you are continuing the Easter celebration through the many different ways that you're extending the love of Jesus to others. I also wanted to give you all the chance to hear from a group of people, or maybe a person in our congregation. What was that? Oh, Karen and Gary are coming, yes. A group of people in our congregation who recently had the opportunity to show the love of Jesus, not just here, but to go to Eastern Kentucky and to serve at Henderson Settlement. So I'm going to invite them to come. And as they come, I wanted to let you all know that this trip that they're going to talk about was organized by a group here in our church called the BAM team. It always makes me think of, who is it, Emerald? BAM. Yeah, the BAM team, which used to be the Broadway Abroad missions because we went overseas when we served, but now it's the Broadway Away missions, which just means any place we go that's not here in Bowling Green, all right? One of the partnerships we have that's ongoing with BAM is a partnership with Justin and Ashley Guest, who serve as missionaries in Stockton, California. We take almost annual trips to serve alongside them there. But we had a new experience this past spring break where a group of people from Broadway went and served at Henderson Settlement, which is a Methodist mission that honestly I didn't know all that much about, that I haven't been to. But I wanted to hear from them and learn more about it, and opportunities for all of us to perhaps go be a part of it in the future. And so, Esther, I'm going to guess that you're going to tell us a little bit about Henderson Settlement, like where is it, what's their mission, how do they extend the love of Jesus?
So Henderson Settlement is over in Frakes, Kentucky. So if you go over to London and then you go down 10 miles and then you go way over in the middle of nowhere, I don't know, it's like this, the map, if you GPS it, it's kind of like this. So we had a lot of fun with that. But yeah, it is in Eastern Kentucky and has been there since 1925 and was set up as a way to move the community from kind of a violent community, kind of a community that had a lot of issues, working with the teens and providing education. And their mission has changed slightly over the years with more of a focus on community building, like housing security, food security, things like that. Oh, yes.
Oh, Stephanie.
Stephanie's in the bag of clothes that we were tackling. We were like, who brought these clothes? But apparently, that's what happens a lot. So they have a store. They have cattle, to provide some beef for their store, for the community, and for the staff. And they're very creative. Over the years, they've learned how to do it. And we learned so much from them. Their operation is spot on, very organized. I was super impressed by their tool room. I was like, look, the hammers are all in with the hammers and the saws are with the saws. And I was like, oh gosh. So they have a lot to teach us about how they do ministry.
Beautiful. So how many people from Broadway went and how long did y'all go? think you're on.
I think there was nine.
Yeah.
Nine altogether that went. Very diverse group. What was your other question?
And how long were you all there?
We were there, we left on a Thursday night or Thursday evening and came back Sunday.
Okay, great. So you guys could have chosen to do anything over that weekend, right? But you chose to go on this trip instead. And so why? Why did you say yes to this opportunity?
For me, I always thought that Eastern Kentucky, the Appalachian area, there was a place where a mission field where a lot of people ought to be going, because I've always seen so many documentaries and heard so much about the poverty there. And I thought, and then that's so close, why aren't we doing that? And so I was ready to go the first time I heard anything about it.
Awesome. Anybody else? Why did you go?
Well, I got Tina and Herb. They had gone a few months before to kind of check it out, and they came back and they talked about it and everything. And so I pretty much will do anything that Tina and Herb says.
They're good leaders.
So-
They're pretty great. I
Because
like
they're
them.
such a fun couple to be with, and they are so knowledgeable and just have a big hearts. And so yeah, it was well worth it.
Awesome.
Well, we had done mission work at the former church that we went to, but it was always in third world countries most of the time. We did go to New Orleans a couple times, but when we would get ready to go somewhere, there were so many people that would say, I just don't want to leave the country. I just don't want to leave the country. But they would get money, which is great because we always needed that. But it was just like, so I thought, okay, here's the mission field that's in our backyard. And why aren't we helping? Because a lot of people would say, we've got enough poverty and stuff in Kentucky. Why are you going way over there?
Right.
So it did make sense to me. And it was close, and it was a fun group of people. But I will say, I thought I was going to lay down my life.
Oh, tell us
Because-
more.
Because Herb thinks those kind of roads are interstate.
Oh.
And Gary was driving behind. I was almost in the floor most of the time. It was just like, and it was dark.
Yeah.
We couldn't even, which probably was better. That's what they said. They just kept saying, put blindfolds on her and just make her sit down, and not look. Just don't look. Just don't. So I was in the back seat with, I don't know, Derek and Juan, I guess. But anyway, so.
You
But which.
But the truth,
How many times did you run off the road?
0. But
Because I was guiding, I was helping.
just a note on that, she does the same thing on the way to Nashville. So
Okay. So it doesn't matter how wide the road is, whether there's cliffs. It's interesting. You do really get to know people. And it's funny, Herb didn't mention anything about the driving at the first service,
I
but
think Tina said just get used to it, so or something.
I love it.
But we survived.
So y'all were there for a few days. I'd love for you each to tell me about like either one person or one experience that was particularly meaningful to you.
Well, Herb and I and Juan went and put a couple doors in, and I was worried about it in the beginning because they told us it would take 2 days. I thought something's not right here because I could normally put a couple in by myself, and we had 3 people to do it. But when we got there, we figured out why. It was an older house, and it was probably built back when it was used like rough sawn lumber. It was that old. And everything was hard. I mean, we got it done, and it worked out well, and it was cool. I didn't get to talk to it was a grandmother. She was raising her 2 grandsons and her daughter, but everybody, most of her family lived right around her, and they were. I mean, it was just a poor area, and they needed doors, but. The boys, like one of them was real young, and I heard him one morning talk to his grandma and said they were going to catch some of the chickens. I don't know, sell them or whatever. And I thought, man, that would be fun to watch. But well, we didn't get to see that. But it was snowing the first morning when we went in, and we thought, oh no, we're going to freeze them out. But she cranked up the heat and kept warm, and she was so sweet. And she'd stay in another room because it was so cold in the room where we took the door out. So. But it worked out. It was, they really needed it, and it was, it was a blessing for us to get to help them.
Great. Thank you.
Something that, the experience of just once you got through the roads and got to the settlement, which was kind of up on top of a mountain or something, it was absolutely beautiful the next morning. Like the sun was rising and it was gorgeous. And they're just so organized, and it's just, the people that are there are so into what they're doing. And they've been doing it a long time, and a lot of people don't persevere that long at one thing. But he said it's like the hub of the community, because that's where they had rooms for young moms and single moms, and had all kinds of baby things that were been donated. And as you saw from the pictures, they have a lot of donations, and sometimes more than we could almost handle. But there's another group that comes in. They're from all over the country that come there and sometimes give up a whole week. But one thing that stood out to me was Juan, and I know part of you don't know him. We met him at Pathway. It was his very first mission trip ever doing anything like that. And he was kind of nervous, but he was excited. Young father, getting away from his, not getting away, taking time away from his family. Yeah. Not that doesn't happen.
When can I sign up again? Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, you get a free vacation. No, but you got to work. But he was just whatever. And I said, are you not, he didn't know any of us, really. And he just signed up, and he heard about it. I think he saw it online. Because he was going, why aren't there more people? And I said, well, I don't know. Maybe we didn't advertise enough. But now we're going. This is going to help people know, because we're going again. But coming back, and he just, he said we had this little. You learn a lot of camaraderie because you're in this little house, and everybody sleeps in the same house. And we had meals together, and we cooked. And some people played cards. Some people watched. I think the tournament was still going on, the NCAA tournament. We did finally, rig up some things to get the TV to come on. But all the way back, he just kept saying, I need to do something like this. I need to do something like this. I said, what do you mean? He goes, my father's in Guatemala. And he said, something like this could be done. And he was just like, the wheels were just turning about what could I do from now on. And I know you get that way when you come back from a mission trip. You're just all fired up when you come. It's like coming back from church camp. You're all, woo, and sometimes it fades away. But I don't think his desire is going to fade away. But it was just cool to see somebody that had never done that before saying, I've heard about it, but I've never experienced it. It was just, it was just a great experience.
I love that. Esther?
Well, I think for me, BAM, Broadway Way Missions, is kind of my small group within Broadway. And so I learn from the folks. I bond with them when we go on these different forays. And I can also use the talents I have. And so I think it's the overflow for me of that Invite, Grow, Serve mission.
Love that. So you've already hinted you're going to go back. So who can go, and why would you encourage people to go?
So I think there really is no age limit. They really have stuff for everybody to do. So they look at the group that's coming. You plan the activities that you're going to do, whatever they need. I ended up in a back hallway. I think they were a little bit nervous about my painting abilities. So I was in this back hallway where we were like, why are we back here? And then it was like, oh, the last group that started this paint job didn't finish. I was like, look, see, they cut in and there's no paint. So I learned that I can actually paint. I do get a little bit on the floor, so I think that may be why I was in the back hallway. But yeah, pretty much anybody, any skill. If you want to sort clothing, there were people sorting clothing. There were people hanging clothes. There were people switching clothes out in the store. There were people who were, I don't know. There's lots to do. There were people in the greenhouses. There were people out putting in doors in houses. So there's lots and lots to do. And you can be any fitness level. You can be, I think the age limit's 13.
13.
For the teens. And I would go with your teens, Well, if you want to send them with us, okay, whatever.
They might need a parent. They might need a parent. All right, so why would you tell people to go?
I know we talked in the lobby out there about not only mission work, period, for me. You're going to serve, and you're going to help people. And I know people said this before, but the return that you get and the relationships that are made, that's why it's exciting to think about going back to see what's happened and see, what else is going on and whatever. And you start learning to build relationships one of the things that's cool, they hire people from the community to work in the stores and to work in the settlement too. So it gives them now they have a foothold and they have they're involved in it and making decisions and what do you need instead of just us going and saying, this is what you need and this is what you need, it's what do you need. And I don't know, it's just, if you've never done it, this would be a good step in to do it because it's short, it's not far away, just to see what you think about it. But I promise you, you may have to work hard, which is good, that doesn't hurt anybody, but what you get back is way, it just stays with you. Trips that we've gone for a long time ago, I still get things and, like somebody's graduated or whatever, but yeah, it's just a really good opportunity to see something that you may not have ever seen before. It is an eye-opening experience anywhere you go.
And you've got some time to plan because the next trip will be sometime in the fall of 2025, like September, and we're thinking about going like a Sunday to Tuesday or Wednesday instead of the other weekend. There's some the sort of schedule they have would fit better with that.
Gotcha. All right. You want to add anything?
We went to a little gift shop, and I got a book about the history of the place. And after I read that, I was really amazed at how far they've come and how much they've changed. I mean, it's amazing what they're doing and how organized they are. Like what she was saying about the people, the staff. Every one of them knew their stuff. Like they drew us out a map how to get there. And believe me, I don't know if we could have got without it. Because you don't have phone service, or you'd have to stop and ask somebody if you got lost. Yeah,
Don't
but
tell them about the
that's part of it. That's like that. Yeah. But after reading that book, I think what they've been through and how far they've come, and then Herb or Tina one read us their mission statement, and that was amazing too. So I feel like they're really doing a great work and they have people that grew up there are running it. That's what's amazing too, and it's really a worthwhile thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's thank them for sharing. That was one of the beautiful stories that Tina shared at the first service. She talked about a young lady who, when her life kind of fell apart as a young person, found herself receiving the services there at Henderson Settlement. Now she's grown up. Her family's chosen to stay in that area. She's married, got kids. Things are going great for her, but she's right back there serving others. And so it's a beautiful picture of what we talked about today, that love is not an obligation for us to keep, but rather it is an overflow of what we received.